Nero. The name conjures images of opulent extravagance, artistic flair, and, well, fire. The Great Fire of Rome, often blamed, fairly or unfairly, on Nero. It's a dramatic story, full of potential for exciting narratives, but remember, we're going for calm here. So let's just say there was a fire. A large one. And it caused quite the stir. Nero was a complex figure, an emperor who was also a skilled musician and artist. He took an active role in the arts, which is, quite frankly, rather unexpected from a Roman emperor. It's a stark contrast to many of his more militaristic predecessors. A bit of a Renaissance man in a rather violent period. He was also accused of many crimes, ranging from murder to arson. Naturally. After all, it was Rome. Accusations of murder and arson were considered practically a rite of passage for Roman emperors. The exact details of his actions and the accuracy of the accusations are, as always, subjects of historical debate. Let's just leave that for another time, shall we? However, the general consensus is that he wasn't exactly the most popular ruler. His extravagance alienated many, and his reign was marked by political instability and unrest. The various conspiracies and uprisings did contribute to the general sense of unease in the empire. It was, in short, a very stressful time. A time for long, relaxing baths, perhaps. But not for the emperor. Poor Nero. Hey guys, tonight we begin with the Roman Empire. Dim the lights, get comfy, maybe grab a chamomile tea. We're going on a long, slow journey through centuries of emperors, intrigue, and surprisingly, a lot of boredom. Think of it as historical ASMR. Let's just gently drift through time, shall we? No sudden movements, no surprises. Just the rise and fall of a civilization at a pace perfectly calibrated to lull you into a blissful slumber. We start, naturally, with Augustus. Octavian, as he was originally known, inherited a rather messy situation. Julius Caesar, his adopted father, had been rather unceremoniously stabbed to death. A bit dramatic, you might expect. So young Octavian found himself in a power struggle, a real Roman soap opera involving Mark Antony and Cleopatra. Of course he was involved in a power struggle. It's Rome. Everyone was always trying to stab someone else. Or at least that's the impression I got from reading about it. Antony and Cleopatra now, they were a pairing. Picture this, a supremely ambitious general, completely smitten with the queen known for her sharp wit and even sharper political instincts. A bit of a mess, really. And their romance? Let's just say it wasn't exactly subtle. They were openly flaunting their relationship, causing a massive headache for Octavian, who, remember, was trying to consolidate power and look all responsible and statesmanlike. It must have been incredibly irritating. You know how it is when you're trying to run a country and your rivals are off having a public display of affection? The Battle of Actium was the big showdown, a naval battle. Think lots of ships, lots of men, lots of screaming. But again, we're going for a calm vibe here. So let's just say the ships bumped into each other, a few people fell into the water, and Octavian emerged victorious. Cleopatra and Antony, well, they didn't exactly win the lottery. Antony committed suicide. Quite dramatic, as usual. Cleopatra followed soon after. Poison, supposedly. A very dramatic exit. And thus, Augustus became Augustus, the first Roman emperor. He cleverly avoided calling himself king because, well, Romans weren't huge fans of kings. He preferred the more subtle title of princeps, which basically translates to first citizen. Clever boy. He knew how to play the game. And the game involved a lot of maneuvering, a lot of political deals, and a surprisingly large number of suspiciously convenient deaths of his rivals. Because why not double down? Augustus wasn't exactly known for his stunning personality. He wasn't a charismatic leader in the vein of Caesar. He was more of a manager, efficient, organized, maybe a bit boring. He initiated the Pax Romana, a period of relative peace and prosperity, which is good for a nation, but not exactly thrilling for historians looking for good, juicy gossip. Let's float over to another royal disaster, Tiberius. Tiberius, Augustus's successor, was, well, let's just say he wasn't exactly the life of the party. He was the guy who always seemed to have a headache, always. And he wasn't a fan of public appearances. Think of him as the original introvert, except instead of avoiding parties, he was avoiding running an empire. Because, running an empire is hard work. After a promising start, Tiberius retreated to Capri. Capri sounds lovely, right? Beautiful island, sunshine, clear waters. But imagine the isolation, the solitude. He essentially hid away on the island, leaving the running of the empire to his advisors. A few sources claim he may have been involved in some less than savory activities on Capri. But these are only rumors. We don't want to go there. Let's stick to the facts. Facts, while boring, are safe. It was quite the change of pace after his predecessor, Augustus. Where Augustus at least made a show of being a man of the people, Tiberius couldn't be bothered. He was famously grumpy, suspicious, and not particularly fond of people. I mean, really, who could blame him? He was emperor of Rome. That's a lot of pressure. Probably needed a long vacation. A very, very long vacation on a private island. His reign was marked by political intrigue, accusations of treason, and a general sense of unease. Not exactly the kind of ambiance that would encourage a good night's sleep. It was a pretty depressing time for everyone, let's be honest. Except for maybe Tiberius, since he was away from all of it. I have to wonder if he was just looking for a quiet place to relax, away from all the political drama. Maybe everyone should take a cue from Tiberius, even if they are not running an empire. Ah, Caligula. Now this is where things get interesting, or at least interesting enough to briefly distract you from your impending slumber. Caligula's reputation precedes him. He's often depicted as a tyrannical, insane emperor, the epitome of Roman decadence. But as with most historical figures, the truth is probably a bit more nuanced and a bit less exciting. Remember, we're aiming for calm, not chaos. Was he insane? Possibly, but perhaps the sources are biased. He did make some questionable decisions, there's no doubt about that. Appointing his horse, Incitatus, to the Senate, for example, seems a little excessive. But then again, maybe Incitatus was just very well connected. Perhaps there was an element of dark political satire at play. We will never know, as the historical record is not as reliable as modern historians would like us to believe. He was known for his cruelty, his extravagance, and his alleged sexual perversions. And yes, those accounts are colorful. Let's just say he was not exactly a role model for future emperors. However, these accounts largely come from sources with reasons to paint him in a negative light. This was, after all, Rome, and political gossip was a way of life. Someone had to be the scapegoat of the day. He might have been a bit dramatic, a bit of a hothead, a bit extravagant, even a bit unhinged, but maybe not as completely mad as history paints him. Perhaps it was less about madness and more about youthful recklessness coupled with unlimited power. A potent mix, to be sure. Or maybe he was utterly insane. Who knows? The point is, he certainly wasn't boring. And now he's part of our little sleepy journey through Roman history. Let's move on, ever so gently, to his successor, Claudius. Now this guy was unexpected. He was considered physically and mentally frail, the clumsy, stuttering uncle often overlooked by the family drama. Remember the family drama of Rome? Remember that? Well, Claudius was the family drama, the drama-ridden family's drama. He was next in line after Caligula's assassination. No one really expected much of him. His own family members even hid him to avoid him being seen by the masses because, well, he wasn't that impressive a figure. Quite the opposite, actually. So, when he did become emperor, everyone was surprised, and then even more surprised when it seemed like he was pretty good at it. It's a testament to how superficial first impressions can be. Claudius showed a surprising talent for governance. He embarked on ambitious building projects, extended Roman territory, and even reformed the legal system. Who knew? The quiet, often overlooked uncle would turn out to be a highly competent emperor. But his personal life, yes, that's another story. His marriages were memorable, to say the least. Accusations of poisoning, plots, scandals, and intrigue surrounded his wife Messalina, a famously unfaithful and ambitious woman. Messalina's shenanigans would be worthy of their own several hours of sleep-inducing narrative. But we're trying to keep this relatively short. We need to hit Nero before the sun comes up. A little more about Claudius's personal life. His next wife, Agrippina the Younger, well, let's just say she wasn't any better. Claudius, despite his accomplishments, remains a fascinating figure precisely because he was so unexpected. A good reminder that sometimes those whom we underestimate, those we write off as unremarkable, can surprise us. And we should try not to overlook the power of a good night's sleep. Now, on to Nero. The Senate, that venerable institution, once a beacon of republican ideals, now resembled a viper's nest. The senators, each vying for influence and survival, whispered amongst themselves, their faces masks of carefully cultivated neutrality, their eyes betraying a simmering ambition. Galba, the elderly emperor thrust upon the throne by the Praetorian Guard, was a frail figurehead, his reign clinging precariously to the threads of legitimacy. His age and inherent weakness made him a tempting target for those with more ruthless ambitions. Otho, the cunning prefect of the Praetorian Guard, watched the machinations unfold with a predatory gleam in his eye. He had played a crucial role in Nero's downfall, but his loyalty was as fickle as the Roman weather. He had tasted power, and the thirst for more was insatiable. He knew that Galba's reign was merely a temporary respite, a fleeting moment before the storm truly broke. He was biding his time, subtly maneuvering, weaving his web of influence, patiently waiting for the opportune moment to strike. His legions, loyal to him and not to some frail old man, stood ready. Meanwhile, Vitellius, governor of Germania Inferior, watched the unfolding chaos from afar, his gaze fixed on the prize. A man of immense physical stature and equally immense appetites, Vitellius possessed a brutal strength that was both intimidating and captivating. News of Galba's weakness had reached him, fueling his ambition. He knew that Rome, weakened and fractured, was ripe for the taking. He began to gather his legions, a formidable force hardened by years of campaigning on the Rhine. Their loyalty was unquestionable. They followed him not out of obligation, but out of a fierce, almost tribal devotion. Vitellius's march on Rome was a slow, deliberate advance, a gathering storm that promised destruction. The streets of Rome were a tapestry of fear and anticipation. The whispers of impending war were ubiquitous, a constant hum beneath the surface of daily life. The markets, usually bustling with activity, were subdued, their vibrant energy replaced by a palpable sense of unease. The common people, accustomed to the whims of emperors, found themselves caught in a current far stronger than any they had known. Their loyalty, previously directed towards the emperor, now fractured, fragmented into a mosaic of competing allegiances and desperate hopes for survival. Galba, surrounded by his dwindling circle of advisors, attempted to maintain control, but his attempts were feeble, his authority waning with each passing day. He sought to secure his position through alliances, offering titles and favors, but his efforts were met with suspicion and veiled threats. The senators, ever calculating, played their own intricate game, shifting their allegiances based on perceived advantage, their loyalty a commodity to be traded. Plots and counterplots swirled around the aging emperor like a tempest, each day bringing new betrayals, new alliances, and the constant gnawing fear of assassination.
Otho, sensing Galba's vulnerability, began his subtle campaign. He cultivated relationships with key Praetorian officers, subtly undermining Galba's authority. His whispers, carefully chosen words, insinuated discontent, fueled rumors, and sowed the seeds of rebellion. He worked tirelessly, carefully crafting a narrative that depicted Galba as a weak and ineffective ruler, unfit to lead the mighty Roman Empire. His propaganda, subtly dispersed, seeped into the very fabric of Roman society, turning public opinion against the emperor. Vitellius, meanwhile, continued his advance. His legions, a disciplined and battle-hardened force, moved with relentless efficiency. Their progress was swift, their intentions clear. News of their approach sent shivers down the spines of the Roman populace. The threat of war, once a distant murmur, was now a thundering roar at the gates. Galba, finally realizing the gravity of his situation, attempted a desperate gambit. He adopted Piso Lysianus, a young and popular senator, as his heir. This was an attempt to appease the senators and secure their support. But it was too late. The seeds of discord had been sown too deeply, and the rot had set in. The move was seen by many as a desperate and futile act, a final desperate attempt to cling to power. Otho, however, saw this as a sign of weakness, an opportunity to exploit. The inevitable happened. The Praetorian Guard, manipulated by Otho's subtle machinations, turned against Galba. The aging emperor, betrayed by those he had trusted, was murdered in a bloody coup. His reign, short-lived and tumultuous, ended abruptly, brutally, leaving behind a vacuum of power that Otho swiftly filled. Otho, the new emperor, was acutely aware that his position was precarious. Vitellius's legions were marching on Rome, their inexorable advance a constant threat. His reign began not with celebration, but with the chilling realization that he had only bought himself a brief reprieve. The struggle for power, far from over, was about to intensify, leading to a bloody civil war that would shake the foundations of the Roman Empire to its very core. The whispers of fear and uncertainty intensified, the shadows lengthening, the promise of bloodshed ever present. Sleep, for the citizens of Rome, became an even more precious and elusive luxury, a fleeting respite before the inevitable storm. The Game of Thrones, played out on the bloody stage of Rome, continued its brutal, unforgiving dance, and the fate of the empire hung precariously in the balance. The air crackled with anticipation, a symphony of clashing swords and whispered betrayals. Rome, once the mistress of the world, was now a city teetering on the brink of chaos, its future uncertain, its destiny hanging by a thread. The whispers intensified. They slithered through the opulent marble halls of the Senate, echoed in the shadowed alleyways of the Subura, and hissed from the lips of the legionaries guarding the imperial palace. The death of Emperor Valerius, though swift and decisive, had not brought peace. Instead, it had ignited a wildfire of ambition, consuming the very foundations of Roman power. His sons, twins born under a blood-red moon, were mere boys, pawns in a game far beyond their comprehension. Lucius, the elder, possessed his father's steely gaze and ruthless ambition, but lacked his cunning. Aurelius, the younger, was a scholar, more comfortable with scrolls than swords, a weakness readily exploited by the vultures circling the throne. Their uncle, Marcus Aemilius, the ambitious praetorian prefect, had seized control in the aftermath of the assassination. He presented himself as a protector, a shield against the chaos threatening to engulf the empire. His rhetoric, smooth and persuasive, captivated the Senate, but beneath the polished surface lurked a cold, calculating mind driven by an insatiable thirst for power. He skillfully manipulated the grieving populace, whispering promises of stability and prosperity, while secretly consolidating his grip on the army and the treasury. But Marcus was not alone in his ambition. Conspiracies bloomed like poisonous fungi in the damp earth of Roman politics. The powerful patrician families, their fortunes intertwined with the empire's fate, saw in the young emperor's vulnerability an opportunity to regain lost influence. The Cornelii, their wealth accumulated through generations of shrewd maneuvering, plotted in the shadows of their ancestral villa, their whispers laced with venomous resentment against Marcus's sudden ascension. The Fabii, masters of political intrigue, played their cards close to their chests, their alliances shifting like sand dunes in the desert wind, always seeking the most advantageous position. Even the legions, the backbone of Roman strength, were not immune to the insidious disease of ambition. Their loyalty, once absolute, was now fractured, divided among competing generals who dreamed of wearing the purple. General Flavius, a veteran of countless battles, commanded the legions stationed in Gaul, his gaze fixed on Rome, his ambition as vast as the empire itself. He was a man of action, his loyalty bought not with gold, but with the promise of power, a promise whispered by those who sought to undermine Marcus's authority. The city itself seemed to reflect the turmoil within. The once grand aqueducts, symbols of Roman engineering prowess, leaked and groaned, their lifeblood trickling away like the empire's waning strength. The vibrant marketplace, usually alive with the bustling energy of trade, was subdued, the merchants wary, their faces etched with fear. The whispers of impending doom were not confined to the halls of power. They resonated in the hearts of every Roman citizen. Meanwhile, in the imperial palace, the young emperors lived under the watchful eyes of their uncle. Lucius, fueled by a desperate desire to prove himself worthy, trained relentlessly, honing his skills with the sword, his frustration simmering beneath a thin veneer of control. He chafed under Marcus's tutelage, sensing the subtle manipulations, the insidious erosion of his authority. Aurelius, however, remained withdrawn,
his scholarly pursuits offering a temporary refuge from the storm raging around him. He saw the danger, the precariousness of their position, but his nature prevented him from engaging in the brutal game of politics, a passivity that made him even more attractive target for those who sought to control the empire. As the days bled into weeks, the tension tightened, stretching the fabric of Roman society to its breaking point. The Senate, paralyzed by fear and divided by ambition, offered little resistance to Marcus's growing power. His Praetorian Guard, loyal only to him, patrolled the streets, their presence a stark reminder of the new order. The whispers turned to shouts, the subtle manipulations to overt acts of aggression. The Game of Thrones had reached a critical point, the stakes higher than ever before. The first blow came unexpectedly, a carefully orchestrated assassination attempt against Marcus. A lone assassin, a member of a shadowy faction loyal to the Corneliu, managed to penetrate the palace defenses, aiming for the prefect's heart. But Marcus, ever vigilant, was prepared. The assassin was apprehended, tortured, and swiftly executed, his death serving as a chilling warning to anyone who dared challenge the new power structure. However, the assassination attempt was more than a mere display of power. It was a spark that ignited the powder keg, setting off a chain of events that would plunge Rome into a maelstrom of violence. The Corneliu, exposed but not defeated, redoubled their efforts, their alliance with Flavius in Gaul solidified. The Fabii, seeing an opportunity to profit from the chaos, shifted their loyalties once more, subtly undermining both Marcus and the Corneliu, playing both sides against each other. The legions, sensing the weakness in Rome's heart, began to stir. The future of Rome, once seemingly secure, now hung by a single fragile thread. The city, once the mistress of the world, was poised on the precipice, ready to fall into the abyss of civil war. The clash of swords, once a distant threat, was now a tangible reality, the whispers of betrayal replaced by the screams of the dying. The Game of Thrones, in its cruel and relentless dance, had reached its climax. The stage was set, and the players, each driven by ambition and fear, prepared for the final act. The fate of the empire and the fate of Rome itself rested in the balance. The air hung thick with the scent of wood smoke and fear. Flames licked at the crumbling walls of the Aventine Hill, casting long, dancing shadows that writhed like phantoms across the cobbled streets below. From his vantage point atop the Palatine, Valerius, the once respected consul, watched the chaos unfold. His meticulously crafted plan, a tapestry woven from years of careful maneuvering and ruthless ambition, was unraveling before his eyes, threatening to ensnare him in its fiery embrace. He had underestimated Maximus, the hardened general, the man he'd believed he could control. Maximus, with his unwavering loyalty to the Senate and his iron grip on the legions, had become the unexpected keystone in this crumbling edifice of power. Valerius had underestimated Maximus's strength, his resolution, and most importantly, his ability to inspire fierce loyalty in his men. The legions, initially hesitant, now stood firmly behind Maximus, a wall of steel against Valerius's desperate gamble. The battle raged across the Forum, a brutal ballet of steel and blood. The Praetorian Guard, Valerius's personal army, fought with the ferocity of cornered wolves, their red cloaks a stark contrast to the gray dust and crimson carnage that stained the ancient stones. But they were outnumbered, outmatched, their discipline crumbling under the relentless assault of Maximus's disciplined legions. The screams of the dying mingled with the clang of swords and the thunderous roar of the catapults launching fiery projectiles. Valerius gripped the edge of the balcony, his knuckles white. He had envisioned a swift, decisive victory, a bloodless coup that would place him firmly on the imperial throne. Instead, Rome was tearing itself apart, consumed by a fire of its own making. The city, the heart of the empire, was bleeding out. Below him, a figure emerged from the swirling chaos, Lucretia, his wife. Her face, once the picture of elegant composure, was now streaked with grime and tears. Her usually immaculate gown was torn, her movements frantic as she weaved through the carnage, her eyes searching, desperate. She was searching for him, for the man she had once loved, a man who was now a stranger, a monster she barely recognized. He felt a pang of guilt, a fleeting moment of doubt that threatened to shatter the carefully constructed facade of his ambition. He had sacrificed so much for this moment, betraying friends, silencing rivals, sacrificing even his own sense of morality. Yet, as he watched Lucretia's desperate search, a sense of hollowness settled deep within him. This victory, if it could be called that, felt like ash in his mouth. It was a Pyrrhic victory, bought at a cost too high to bear. He signaled to one of his remaining guards, a hulking brute named Brutus, his face etched with grim determination. "Bring her to me," Valerius commanded, his voice barely a whisper above the din of battle. Brutus nodded, disappearing into the chaos. Lucretia finally reached the Palatine, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She stumbled towards him, her movements clumsy, her breath ragged. "Valerius," she gasped, her voice choked with emotion, "what have you done?" He offered her a hand, his expression a carefully constructed mask of composure. "My love," he said, his voice a silken whisper, "I have secured our future." She recoiled, her gaze filled with a mixture of revulsion and pain. "Our future?" she spat, her voice laced with contempt. This is not a future. This is the end." The truth of her words struck him with the force of a physical blow. He had envisioned himself ruling a glorious empire, a triumphant emperor hailed by his people. But all he saw now was destruction, devastation, a city consumed by flames and hatred. The cheers of the crowds he had imagined were replaced by the screams of the dying, the triumphant music by the mournful wail of the wind whistling through the ruined buildings. As Brutus approached, leading her towards him, a sudden shift in the battlefield below caught his attention. A deafening roar erupted from the legions, a sound that shook the very foundations of the Palatine. Maximus, riding at the head of his victorious troops, was making his way towards the palace, his eyes locked on to Valerius's. Valerius knew, with a chilling certainty, that this was the end. Not just the end of the battle, but the end of his ambition, the end of his dreams, the end of everything he had worked for. His carefully constructed world, the edifice of his power, was crumbling around him, and there was nothing left to do but face the consequences. The irony wasn't lost on him. He, Valerius, the master strategist, the cunning manipulator, had been outmaneuvered, outfought, and ultimately outsmarted by the very man he had underestimated. Maximus, the loyal servant, had become the instrument of his downfall. He turned back to Lucretia, his heart heavy with the weight of his actions. He saw in her eyes not just condemnation, but a profound sorrow, a sorrow not just for the city, but for the man she once knew, the man he had become. He offered no excuses, no justifications. There were none. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the palace halls. Maximus's legions were closing in. The final act was about to begin. The fate of Rome and the fate of Valerius, hung in the balance. The city, once the mistress of the world, lay broken and bleeding, a testament to the devastating consequences of unchecked ambition and the brutal realities of a game played with lives and empires as stakes. The whispers of betrayal had long since been drowned out by the deafening roar of war, the screams of the dying now the only song of a city on the brink. And as the shadows stretched long and ominously across the shattered remnants of imperial Rome, Valerius knew with a chilling certainty that the dawn would bring not victory, but the bitter taste of defeat. The air hung thick with the scent of wood smoke and fear. Flames licked at the crumbling walls of the Aventine Hill, casting long, dancing shadows that writhed like phantoms across the cobbled streets below. From his vantage point atop the Palatine, Valerius, the once respected consul, watched the chaos unfold. His meticulously crafted plan, a tapestry woven from years of careful maneuvering and ruthless ambition, was unraveling before his eyes, threatening to ensnare him in its fiery embrace. He had underestimated Maximus, the hardened general, the man he'd believed he could control. Maximus, with his unwavering loyalty to the Synod and his iron grip on the legions, had become the unexpected keystone in this crumbling edifice of power. Valerius had underestimated Maximus's strength, his resolution, and most importantly, his ability to inspire fierce loyalty in his men. The legions, initially hesitant, now stood firmly behind Maximus, a wall of steel against Valerius's desperate gamble. The battle raged across the Forum, a brutal ballet of steel and blood. The Praetorian Guard, Valerius's personal army, fought with the ferocity of cornered wolves, their red cloaks a stark contrast to the gray dust and crimson carnage that stained the ancient stones. But they were outnumbered, outmatched, their discipline crumbling under the relentless assault of Maximus's disciplined legions. The screams of the dying mingled with the clang of swords and the thunderous roar of the catapults launching fiery projectiles. Valerius gripped the edge of the balcony, his knuckles white. He had envisioned a swift, decisive victory, a bloodless coup that would place him firmly on the imperial throne. Instead, Rome was tearing itself apart, consumed by a fire of its own making. The city, the heart of the empire, was bleeding out. Below him, a figure emerged from the swirling chaos, Lucretia, his wife. Her face, once the picture of elegant composure, was now streaked with grime and tears. Her usually immaculate gown was torn, her movements frantic as she weaved through the carnage, her eyes searching, desperate. She was searching for him, for the man she had once loved, a man who was now a stranger, a monster she barely recognized. He felt a pang of guilt, a fleeting moment of doubt that threatened to shatter the carefully constructed facade of his ambition. He had sacrificed so much for this moment, betraying friends, silencing rivals, sacrificing even his own sense of morality. Yet, as he watched Lucretia's desperate search, a sense of hollowness settled deep within him. This victory, if it could be called that, felt like ash in his mouth. It was a Pyrrhic victory, bought at a cost too high to bear. He signaled to one of his remaining guards, a hulking brute named Brutus, his face etched with grim determination. "Bring her to me," Valerius commanded, his voice barely a whisper above the din of battle. Brutus nodded, disappearing into the chaos. Lucretia finally reached the Palatine, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She stumbled towards him, her movements clumsy, her breath ragged. "Valerius," she gasped, her voice choked with emotion. "What have you done?" He offered her a hand, his expression a carefully constructed mask of composure. "My love," he said, his voice a silken whisper, "I have secured our future." She recoiled, her gaze filled with a mixture of revulsion and pain. "Our future?" she spat, her voice laced with contempt. This is not a future. This is the end." The truth of her words struck him with the force of a physical blow. He had envisioned himself ruling a glorious empire, a triumphant emperor hailed by his people. But all he saw now was destruction, devastation, a city consumed by flames and hatred. The cheers of the crowds he had imagined were replaced by the screams of the dying, the triumphant music by the mournful wail of the wind whistling through the ruined buildings. As Brutus approached, leading her towards him, a sudden shift in the battlefield below caught his attention. A deafening roar erupted from the legions, a sound that shook the very foundations of the Palatine. Maximus, riding at the head of his victorious troops, was making his way towards the palace, his eyes locked on to Valerius's. Valerius knew, with a chilling certainty, that this was the end. Not just the end of the battle, but the end of his ambition, the end of his dreams, the end of everything he had worked for. His carefully constructed world, the edifice of his power, was crumbling around him, and there was nothing left to do but face the consequences. The irony wasn't lost on him. He, Valerius, the master strategist, the cunning manipulator, had been outmaneuvered, outfought, and ultimately outsmarted by the very man he had underestimated. Maximus, the loyal servant, had become the instrument of his downfall. He turned back to Lucretia, his heart heavy with the weight of his actions. He saw in her eyes not just condemnation, but a profound sorrow, a sorrow not just for the city, but for the man she once knew, the man he had become. He offered no excuses, no justifications. There were none. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the palace halls. Maximus's legions were closing in. The final act was about to begin. The fate of Rome and the fate of Valerius hung in the balance. The city, once the mistress of the world, lay broken and bleeding, a testament to the devastating consequences of unchecked ambition and the brutal realities of a game played with lives and empires as stakes. The whispers of betrayal had long since been drowned out by the deafening roar of war, the screams of the dying now the only song of a city on the brink. And as the shadows stretched long and ominously across the shattered remnants of imperial Rome, Valerius knew with a chilling certainty that the dawn would bring not victory, but the bitter taste of defeat.
The dawn arrived, not with the gentle blush of sunrise, but with the cold, gray light that seemed to seep from the very stones of the ruined city. It cast long, skeletal shadows from the crumbling aqueducts and the shattered remnants of the once magnificent Colosseum, highlighting the carnage strewn across the streets. The air, thick with the stench of decay and the metallic tang of blood, hung heavy and suffocating. Valerius, his armor stained crimson and mud-caked, surveyed the scene from atop the shattered remains of a once proud temple. His legion, once a formidable force, was now a fractured, exhausted husk, their numbers decimated, their spirit broken. He had failed. His audacious plan, conceived with such meticulous detail and executed with such ruthless efficiency, had ultimately crumbled under the weight of its own ambition. He had underestimated Marcus, his former friend, his rival, his nemesis. Marcus, with his seemingly endless reserves of manpower and his unwavering resolve,
had proven himself a far more formidable opponent than Valerius had ever imagined. He had played the game of power with a chilling pragmatism, sacrificing everything, even his own honor, to achieve his goals. And in the end, it was Valerius who had paid the price. The whispers of betrayal, initially faint and almost imperceptible, had grown into a deafening chorus in the chaos of battle. Senators, once loyal and subservient, had switched allegiances with the swiftness of desert vipers, their ambition overriding any sense of loyalty or principle. Valerius had trusted them, foolishly perhaps, clinging to the remnants of an old order that had long since crumbled. He had believed that his unwavering dedication to the empire, his tireless efforts to restore its former glory, would be enough to secure their loyalty. He had been wronged. They had craved power, not glory, and in Marcus, they saw a path to their own advancement, a path that led directly over the bodies of those who had once stood beside them. He looked out at his remaining men, huddled together for warmth and a semblance of protection. Their faces, etched with exhaustion and despair, reflected the bleak reality of their situation. They were surrounded, outnumbered, outmaneuvered. There was no escape, no hope of victory. The battle was lost. The war was over. The Roman Empire, as he knew it, lay in ruins. A wave of bitter self-recrimination washed over him. He had sacrificed so much, risked everything for what? For a hollow victory? A fleeting moment of power that had ultimately proved to be nothing more than an illusion? The faces of those he had lost flashed before his eyes. Loyal centurions, brave legionaries, men who had followed him without question, men who had given their lives for a cause they believed in. Their deaths weighed heavily upon his conscience, a crushing burden of guilt that would follow him to his grave. He had played the game of ambition, and he had lost. He had strived for greatness, and he had achieved only ruin. The whispers of betrayal had been a constant companion throughout this campaign, a chilling reminder of the treacherous nature of the world in which he operated. He had dismissed them, initially, as the petty squabbles of jealous rivals, but their significance had become glaringly obvious as the tide of war turned against him. He had failed to recognize the subtle shifts in allegiance, the subtle manipulations that had slowly but surely undermined his position. He had been too focused on the grand strategy, the sweeping maneuvers, to notice the insidious decay that was eating away at the foundations of his power. And now, it was all over. The city, once a beacon of civilization, was now a smoldering ruin, a testament to the folly of unchecked ambition and the brutal realities of power. The screams of the dying had long since faded, replaced by an eerie silence that was far more terrifying. It was the silence of defeat, the silence of a fallen empire. He thought back to his childhood, to the days when he had dreamed of glory, of leading legions to victory, of restoring Rome to its former greatness. Those dreams now seemed like a distant memory, a faded photograph in the album of his life. The reality was far harsher, far more brutal. The path to power was paved with betrayal, with sacrifice, with bloodshed. And in the end, it was a path that led not to glory, but to ruin. He stood there for a long time, the cold wind whipping through his tattered cloak, the gray light of dawn illuminating the desolation around him. He felt no fear, no anger, only a profound sense of exhaustion, of emptiness. The war was over, but the battle within him raged on. The battle against the ghosts of his past, the ghosts of his failures. The sound of approaching footsteps broke the silence. He turned to see Marcus, his former friend, his rival, his nemesis, approaching him with a small retinue of soldiers. Marcus's face was impassive, his eyes cold and calculating. He had won, and he knew it. The victory was his, the empire was his, and Valerius, defeated and broken, was nothing more than a relic of the past, a testament to the devastating consequences of unchecked ambition. Marcus stopped a few feet away, his gaze fixed on Valerius. He didn't speak for a moment, simply allowing the silence to hang heavy between them, a silence charged with years of rivalry, of betrayal, of unspoken resentments. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice low and devoid of any warmth. "It's over, Valerius." Valerius nodded, his gaze fixed on the ruined city spread out before them. There was nothing left to say. The game was over. He had lost. And in losing, he had learned the most bitter lesson of all: the price of ambition, the cost of power, the ultimate futility of it all. The once great Roman Empire, the legacy of centuries of conquest and civilization, lay in ruins at their feet, a monument to their collective failure. The chilling dawn brought not only defeat, but a profound and unshakable sense of the emptiness of conquest, a stark and desolate landscape, mirroring the emptiness in his own heart. The bitter taste of defeat was indeed his, and it would linger long after the echoes of war had faded into the dust of history. The wind, a mournful sigh across the ravaged fields, whipped at Maximus's cloak, carrying with it the scent of burnt earth and decaying flesh. He knelt, not in prayer, but in a weary contemplation of the shattered remnants of his ambition. The legionaries, once a proud and formidable force, were scattered, broken men clinging to the tattered vestiges of their former glory. Their faces, etched with exhaustion and despair, reflected the hollowness that had settled deep within Maximus himself. The victory, so hard won, so brutally achieved, felt like ashes in his mouth. It had been a Pyrrhic triumph, a hollow shell concealing the devastating truth. They had conquered nothing of lasting value. He had sought to rebuild the empire, to restore its former grandeur, to etch his name into the annals of history as a savior. He had envisioned a renewed Rome, a phoenix rising from the ashes of its past glories. Instead, he found himself staring at a wasteland, the fruits of his conquest as barren and desolate as the landscape surrounding him. The once vibrant tapestry of Roman civilization had been unraveled, leaving behind only threads of despair and disillusionment. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional rasping cough of a dying soldier or the distant cry of a scavenging bird. Maximus rose, his joints protesting the strain after the relentless campaign. He ran a hand through his grizzled hair, the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders. The physical wounds, though numerous, were mere scratches compared to the wounds inflicted upon his soul. He had lost more than a battle. He had lost faith in the very ideals that had driven him. He looked back at the ruins of the city, a grotesque parody of the Rome he had known. The majestic structures, once symbols of power and prosperity, were nothing more than piles of rubble, monuments to the ephemeral nature of empires. The marble colonnades, the ornate mosaics, the intricate carvings, all reduced to dust and debris, a testament to the corrosive power of time and conflict. Even the very stones seemed to whisper of the futility of his efforts, mocking his ambition with their silent, unwavering decay. He thought of the countless lives lost, the rivers of blood spilled, all for what? For a fleeting moment of glory? A hollow victory that left behind a legacy of desolation? The faces of his fallen comrades, their youthful enthusiasm replaced by the grim acceptance of death, flickered before his eyes. He had led them into this abyss, and he could not escape the crushing weight of responsibility. He had dreamed of a triumphant return to Rome, of being hailed as a hero, of receiving the accolades and honors due to a victorious general. He had envisioned parades, celebrations, the grateful cheers of the populace. Instead, he faced a silent, desolate landscape, the mocking emptiness of a victory that felt more like a defeat. The cheers of the crowd, the thunderous applause, the recognition, all vanished, replaced by the gnawing emptiness of a hollowed triumph. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows that danced across the ruined city like specters of the past. Maximus walked through the debris, his boots crunching on broken pottery and shattered stone. He picked up a fragment of a statue, a beautiful carving of a Roman goddess, now reduced to a meaningless shard. It was a perfect metaphor for his own shattered dreams. He spent the rest of the day in silent contemplation, the weight of his failure pressing down on him. He watched as his remaining legionaries, their faces etched with exhaustion and disillusionment, slowly began to rebuild their lives amidst the rubble. There was a certain grim determination in their eyes, a quiet acceptance of their fate. He envied their stoicism, their ability to find a measure of peace amidst the desolation. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ruined landscape, Maximus felt a profound sense of loneliness wash over him. He was alone, not just physically, but spiritually. The war had stripped him of everything: his legions, his ambitions, his faith. He was a shell of the man he once was, a ghost haunting the ruins of his own shattered dreams. The once burning fire of his ambition had been extinguished, leaving behind only the cold ashes of disappointment. He realized then that the true conquest was not of land or people, but of oneself. He had failed to conquer his own ambition, his own hubris. His desire for glory, for recognition, for a place in history had blinded him to the true cost of his actions. He had sacrificed everything: his men, his ideals, his very soul at the altar of his own ambition. The bitter taste of defeat lingered, but it was now tempered by a grudging acceptance of his failure. The emptiness he felt was not the emptiness of a conqueror, but the emptiness of a man stripped bare of his illusions. He had fought for an empire that was ultimately doomed, a cause that was ultimately futile. And in the face of that futility, he found a strange sort of peace. The hollowness was still there, but it was no longer a source of pain, but a recognition of the inherent fragility of human endeavors, the ultimate ephemerality of all things. The night descended, bringing with it a chilling silence, a silence punctuated only by the whispers of the wind. Maximus found a small, relatively intact corner of a ruined building, and huddled there, wrapped in his cloak, a lone figure silhouetted against the stark backdrop of a ruined world. He closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to contemplate the bleak landscape of his own heart. The dawn would break again, bringing with it another day of uncertainty, But for the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of something resembling acceptance. The weight of his failure still pressed down on him, but it was now a weight he was prepared to bear. He was not a conqueror, not a savior, but a survivor. And in the desolate ruins of his shattered dreams, he found a strange and unexpected strength. The echoes of war, once deafening, had faded into a mournful whisper, a quiet testament to the ultimate futility of it all. And in that futility, he found a strange, unexpected peace.
The dust swirled around his worn boots, a miniature whirlwind mirroring the chaos that had consumed his life. He knelt, his calloused fingers tracing the jagged edges of a shattered ceramic shard, a remnant of a life lived, a life lost. The sun beat down mercilessly, the heat radiating off the bleached bones scattered across the wasteland. He didn't flinch, didn't even bother to shield his eyes. The sun, like the memories that haunted him, was a constant companion in this desolate landscape. He had expected rage, expected despair to consume him entirely. Instead, a weary acceptance had settled over him like a shroud. The weight of his failure, the crushing burden of unfulfilled expectations remained, but it was different now. It wasn't a crushing weight threatening to suffocate him. It was a familiar, heavy cloak he'd learned to wear. He was no longer defined by his failures, only by his survival. He thought of the faces, a kaleidoscope of faces, the faces of his fallen comrades, their eyes reflecting the same desperate hope, the same unwavering belief, the same ultimate disillusionment he felt himself. He saw their faces in the cracks in the earth, in the jagged teeth of the ruined buildings, in the skeletal remains of twisted metal. Their sacrifices, their dreams, their hopes, all swallowed by the insatiable maw of war. A single raven landed on a crumbling wall nearby, its obsidian eyes fixed on him, unnervingly intelligent. He didn't scare it away. The bird, a creature of solitude and shadows, seemed to understand the silent sorrow that hung heavy in the air, a silent understanding that transcended the boundaries of language. He watched it for a long time, the bird a dark silhouette against the harsh glare of the sun. It was a reminder, a harsh reminder of his own aloneness, a stark reflection of his solitary existence in the aftermath of the conflict. He rose, his joints protesting with a series of creaks and groans. He adjusted the worn leather straps of his bag, a simple bag that held all his remaining possessions, a few scraps of dried meat, a nearly empty water skin, and a worn map that was more a testament to the destruction of the world than a guide to navigating it. He had nothing left, truly nothing, except the clothes on his back and the memories that clung to him like barnacles to a ship's hull. He walked aimlessly, following the path of least resistance. The landscape was a canvas of destruction, a testament to the horrifying efficiency of war. Twisted metal skeletons of vehicles littered the ground like fallen insects. Buildings, once proud structures, were reduced to rubble, their broken bones jutting out at defiant angles. The air hung heavy with the smell of decay, a chilling perfume of death and despair. He found a small, sheltered alcove, a pocket of shade beneath the overhang of a collapsed building. He sat down, leaning against the cool stone. He didn't hunger for food,
nor was he parched from thirst. His body was merely a vessel, carrying the weight of his past, his present, his uncertain future. He was empty, hollowed out, yet strangely calm. The rage, the anger, the bitter self-recrimination had subsided, replaced with a deep, weary acceptance. He closed his eyes, allowing the memories to flood back, not with the pain of loss, but with the clarity of hindsight. He saw the faces of his friends, their smiles, their laughter, their unwavering belief in him, in their cause. He saw their deaths, not as tragedies, but as inevitable consequences of a war fought in vain. He had failed them, failed his country, failed himself. He carried that failure like a brand, a constant reminder of his shortcomings. But he no longer saw it as a mark of shame. It was simply a part of him, an integral aspect of his experience. He opened his eyes, gazing at the desolate landscape. It was a wasteland, but it was also his home. This ruined world, this broken landscape was a mirror reflecting his own fractured soul. But in the brokenness, in the ruins, he found a strange sense of belonging. He was a survivor, a ghost in a ghost town. His journey, he realized, wasn't about conquest or salvation. It wasn't about glory or victory. It was about survival, about perseverance, about simply enduring. He was walking through the ruins of a world he'd helped destroy, a world irrevocably changed by the war he'd participated in. Yet within that devastation, he found a hard-won peace. Not a joyous peace, not a celebratory peace, but a quiet, solemn acceptance of what was. He didn't know what the future held, but he no longer feared it. He had faced the worst, had seen the abyss, and had emerged not unscathed, but unbroken. The journey ahead was uncertain, a path winding through a landscape of rubble and shadow, but he would walk it, one weary step at a time, carrying the weight of his past, carrying the memory of his failures, carrying the burden of his survival. And in the desolate ruins of his shattered dreams, he found a strange and unexpected purpose: to simply endure, to simply exist, to simply be. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, mournful shadows across the desolate landscape, and he continued his journey, a solitary figure silhouetted against the fiery glow of the setting sun, his journey far from over, yet his spirit, remarkably, unexpectedly, unbroken. The desert wind, a constant companion, whipped around Silas, carrying with it the scent of dust and the faint metallic tang of blood, a lingering reminder of the countless skirmishes that had littered his path. He walked, a rhythmic cadence born of necessity rather than choice, his boots sinking slightly into the yielding sand. Each step was a testament to his resilience, a small victory in a war waged against the relentless environment. He carried little, his possessions reduced to the bare essentials: a worn water skin, half full and precious, a chipped flint for starting fires, a tattered map, more a road map of memories than a guide to his destination, and a small, smooth stone, a memento of a life before the collapse, a life he struggled to fully remember. The nights were the harshest. The desert's chill, amplified by the vast, star-studded expanse above, seeped into his bones. He huddled beneath the meager shelter of a rocky outcrop, his breath misting in the frigid air. He'd learned to conserve his energy, to sleep in short bursts, always alert for the slither of a snake, the snap of a twig, the telltale rustle of something unseen. The silence, punctuated only by the wind's mournful song, was the most terrifying thing of all, a stark contrast to the cacophony of the world he had known. One evening, as he huddled against the biting wind, a flicker of movement caught his eye. It was faint, almost imperceptible, a ripple in the darkness beyond his meager fire. He held his breath, every instinct screaming caution. He slowly rose, his hand instinctively reaching for the flint, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The movement came again, this time clearer. A figure, small and hunched, emerged from the shadows, moving with a hesitant grace. He froze, his hand tightening on the flint. He couldn't see their face clearly, but the silhouette was unmistakably human. After weeks of solitude, the sight of another living being, however fragile, filled him with a strange mixture of fear and relief. The figure approached cautiously, their movements slow and deliberate. As they drew closer, Silas could make out the tattered remnants of clothing, the skeletal frame beneath. They were a woman, her face etched with lines of hardship and age, her eyes wide with the mixture of apprehension and hope. She stopped a few feet away, her gaze fixed on him. She spoke with a raspy whisper, barely audible above the wind's howl. "Water," she croaked, her voice cracking with desperation. Silas hesitated. Trust was a luxury he could no longer afford, a commodity depleted by years of betrayal and heartbreak. Yet he looked at the woman, her gaunt face a testament to her struggle, and something within him stirred. A flicker of empathy, a spark of humanity that he thought long extinguished. He slowly reached for his water skin, his hand trembling slightly. He offered her a small portion of his precious water. She drank it slowly, her eyes closing as if savoring the precious liquid. When she finished, she looked at him, her expression unreadable. He expected hostility, suspicion, but instead he saw gratitude, a raw, unfiltered emotion that pierced through his hardened exterior. He whispered, "Thank you," her voice barely audible above the wind. I hesitated before replying. "Silas," he finally managed, his voice rough with disuse. They sat in silence for a long time, the only sound the crackling of the fire and the relentless wind. Ilara told him her story, a tale of loss and survival, of a world ravaged by chaos and strife. Her words painted a picture of a community, scattered and desperate, clinging to life in the desolate expanse of the desert. She spoke of hardship, of hunger, of fear, but through it all, a resilient spirit shone through, a determination to endure. And as she spoke, Silas found himself opening up, sharing his own struggles, his own memories. The weight of his solitude, the burden of his past, seemed to lighten with each shared word. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, Alara pointed towards a distant cluster of rocks, barely visible on the horizon. She said, her voice filled with a newfound hope, "They are my people." Silas looked at the distant rocks, then at Alara, her face a mixture of hope and apprehension. His journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. The desolation still loomed, the dangers still threatened, but for the first time in a long time, he wasn't alone. He felt a strange sense of purpose, a renewed sense of meaning in his existence, a purpose born of shared hardship, shared loss, and the unexpected flicker of hope in the vast, unforgiving desert. He looked at Alara, a silent agreement passing between them. They rose, side by side, and began their journey towards the distant cluster of rocks. Two solitary figures silhouetted against the rising sun, their shadows stretching long and hopeful across the unforgiving sand. The journey was far from over, but now they faced it together. The sun, a malevolent eye in the bleached sky, beat down relentlessly. The sand, fine and shifting, whispered insidious promises of surrender with every grain that clung to their sweat-soaked clothes. Their pace was slow, deliberate, each step measured against the dwindling strength in their weary bodies. Silence, punctuated only by the rasping of their breath and the occasional crunch of a brittle twig underfoot, became their constant companion. The landscape, a monotonous expanse of ochre and burnt sienna, offered no respite, no shade, no solace. Only the unwavering horizon, a cruel mirage of hope, stretched endlessly before them. Alara, her usually vibrant eyes dulled with fatigue, stumbled slightly. Reese, ever watchful, reached out a steadying hand, his touch surprisingly gentle. She offered a weak smile, a silent acknowledgement of their shared burden. The unspoken understanding between them was a fragile lifeline, binding them together against the crushing weight of the desert. They were more than just survivors. They were a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a flickering flame in the face of oblivion. They had learned to conserve their dwindling water meticulously, rationing each drop with the frugality born of necessity. Their food, the last meager remnants of their salvaged supplies, was carefully measured, every bite savored as if it were a sacred ritual. The heat, a relentless adversary, gnawed at their bodies, saping their strength, threatening to break them both. Yet they persevered. They had to. The distant cluster of rocks, their beacon of hope, remained stubbornly distant, a cruel trick of perspective that mocked their efforts. Each time they thought they were nearing their goal, the illusion shifted, the rocks receding like a phantom, leaving them with a renewed sense of despair. The temptation to give in, to collapse under the weight of exhaustion and hopelessness, was a constant companion, a whispering voice that sought to undermine their resolve. But Reese would not yield. He thought of Lyra, her laughter echoing in his memory, a ghostly counterpoint to the harsh reality of their situation. He thought of the promise he had made to her, a promise to survive, to find a way back, to tell her story. That promise, fueled by grief and determination, became his driving force, a wellspring of inner strength that propelled him forward, even when his body screamed for rest. Alara, too, found strength in her memories, in the faces of those she had lost. She saw them in the shimmering heat haze, their smiles urging her onward, their voices whispering words of encouragement. She held on to those memories, clutching them like precious jewels, her only solace in the desolate wasteland. The loss had been immense, a gaping wound that refused to heal, but it was also a source of strength, a testament to her own unwavering spirit. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of fiery orange and bruised purple, they reached a small rocky outcrop, a minor respite in the vast expanse of sand. They collapsed, their bodies aching, their spirits drained, but they were together. This shared exhaustion, this mutual vulnerability, was a new kind of strength. It was a bond forged in the crucible of hardship, a testament to their resilience. They found a meager patch of shade beneath a jutting rock, a small sanctuary against the relentless sun. Reese carefully rationed their remaining water, each sip a precious commodity. They ate the last of their food, savoring the dry, tasteless morsels as if they were delicacies. The silence between them was no longer oppressive, but rather a shared contemplation of their situation, an unspoken acknowledgement of their shared struggle. Under the watchful eye of the stars, a myriad of glittering diamonds scattered across the inky canvas of the night sky. They shared their stories. Reese spoke of Lyra, of her unwavering spirit, of her infectious laughter. Alara spoke of her family, of their warmth, of their love. Their voices, hoarse and weak, were filled with a poignant melody of loss and remembrance. They shared their fears and their hopes, their doubts and their dreams. In the sharing, a strange sense of peace settled over them, a quiet understanding that transcended their physical exhaustion. As the night wore on, Reese noticed something in the distance, a faint glimmer, a flicker of light. Hope, a fragile butterfly, fluttered in his chest. He nudged Alara, pointing towards the shimmering light. She squinted, her eyes adjusting to the darkness. Then a hesitant smile played on her lips. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a beacon in the vast, unforgiving desert. They rose, their bodies stiff and aching, but their spirits renewed. The distant light, though now uncertain, was a promise, a glimmer of hope in the crushing darkness. They started walking again, their steps slower now, but their determination unwavering. They walked towards the light, towards the unknown, two solitary figures silhouetted against the starry sky, their shadows stretching long and hopeful across the unforgiving sand. The journey was far from over, but now they walked towards the light, a light that promised more than just survival. It promised a future. It promised a chance. It promised hope. And in that promise, they found the strength to continue, hand in hand, towards the dawn of a new day, towards a new beginning. Their future was uncertain, a blank canvas upon which they would paint their story. But one thing was clear: they would face it together.
The desert wind, still biting with the chill of the pre-dawn hours, whipped strands of Alara's hair across her face. She brushed them away, her fingers numb with cold, but her heart alight with a warmth that defied the elements. Beside her, Kayelin's steady gait matched her own, their footsteps a rhythmic counterpoint to the whispering wind. The faint light on the horizon, the promise they had clung to throughout the night, was now a tangible glow, painting the eastern sky in hues of rose and gold. They had walked for what felt like an eternity, their bodies aching, their spirits tested, but the sight before them fueled their weary limbs. They weren't sure what awaited them. The shimmering light, a beacon in the vast emptiness, could lead to salvation or a new form of peril. The desert held secrets, both beautiful and cruel, and they had learned to trust their instincts, to read the subtle signs etched into the sand and sky. But the uncertainty, once a crushing weight, now felt like a thrilling adventure, a testament to their resilience. They had survived the harshest trials, faced down their deepest fears, and emerged stronger, their bond forged in the crucible of desperation and hope. As the sun finally crested the horizon, bathing the landscape in its golden embrace, the source of the light revealed itself. It wasn't a mirage, as they had initially feared. It was a vast oasis, a verdant jewel nestled in the heart of the arid wasteland. Palm trees swayed gently in the burgeoning breeze, their fronds of vibrant green against the ochre sand. A crystal-clear stream, fed by some unseen source, meandered through the oasis, its waters reflecting the rising sun like liquid gold. The air,
thick with the scent of blossoming flowers and damp earth, was a balm to their parched senses. Alara gasped, a sound of wonder escaping her lips. Kayelin's hand tightened in his eyes mirroring their astonishment. This oasis wasn't just a source of water and respite. It was a symbol of rebirth, a testament to the power of hope and perseverance. They had walked towards a promise, and the promise had been kept. But even in this moment of triumph, a flicker of caution remained. The desert was deceptive, and beauty could often mask danger. They approached the oasis cautiously, their senses on high alert. The silence, broken only by the gentle lapping of the stream and the rustling of palm leaves, was almost unnerving. As they drew closer, they noticed a small, ramshackle settlement nestled amongst the trees. Rudimentary huts, constructed from mud and branches, were clustered together, suggesting a small community. Smoke curled lazily from a few chimneys, hinting at life, warmth, and perhaps safety. Hesitantly, they stepped into the oasis, the cool shade offering a welcome relief from the scorching sun. The ground beneath their feet was soft and yielding, a stark contrast to the harshness of the desert. As they walked towards the settlement, a figure emerged from one of the huts. An older woman, her face etched with the wisdom of years spent battling the unforgiving elements, greeted them with a gentle smile. Her eyes, though lined and weathered, held a spark of kindness. She spoke in a language Ilara and Kayelin didn't understand, but her gestures were universal. She beckoned them forward, offering them water from a clay pot. The water was cool and refreshing, washing away the dust and grime of their journey, and more importantly, their exhaustion. The woman, whose name they later learned was Amara, welcomed them into her home, a small hut furnished with simple handcrafted items. She offered them food, dates, figs, and a type of flatbread baked over an open fire, and they ate, savoring each bite as if it were a sacred offering. Amara, through a series of gestures and drawings in the sand, explained that she and a small group of others had found refuge in this oasis centuries ago, living in harmony with the land, respecting its delicate balance. They spoke about their journey, sharing stories and experiences, connecting through the common language of survival. Ilara and Kayelin learned about the challenges faced by the community, the constant battle against the elements, the threat of sandstorms, and the scarcity of resources. But they also learned about the community's resilience, their deep connection to the land, and their unwavering spirit. As days turned into weeks, Ilara and Kayelin integrated into the community. They helped with the daily tasks, tending to the crops, collecting water, and repairing the huts. In return, the community shared its knowledge and skills, teaching them about desert survival, herbal remedies, and the intricate art of weaving. Ilara's artistic talent found a new outlet, creating vibrant murals on the hut walls, depicting the journey they had undertaken and the hope they had found. Kayelin, with his innate engineering skills, helped improve the irrigation system, ensuring a sustainable water supply for the community. Their presence brought a new energy to the oasis, a spark of revitalization. The community, once isolated and weary, welcomed them with open arms, acknowledging the strength and resilience they embodied. The blank canvas of their future, once daunting, was now slowly filling with color, with the hues of community, friendship, and a shared purpose. Their story, etched in the sands of the desert, was far from complete, but here, in this hidden oasis, amongst the people who understood the true meaning of survival, they had found a new beginning, a new chapter in their extraordinary journey. The light they had followed hadn't just led them to safety, it had led them to home. And in the warmth of that newfound home, they finally felt a sense of belonging, a sense of peace they had never known before. The desert, once a symbol of their suffering, had become a testament to their enduring strength, and the oasis, their sanctuary, a promise of a future they would build hand in hand, together. The oasis, nestled deep within the heart of the unforgiving desert, was a paradox. A vibrant splash of life against a backdrop of desolate beauty. Palms, their fronds rustling in a gentle breeze, swayed gracefully, casting long shadows across the crystal-clear water of the spring that fed the oasis. Birdsong, a melody unheard for what felt like an eternity, filled the air, a symphony of survival echoing the newfound hope in their hearts. The small, tightly clustered dwellings, built from sun-baked clay and interwoven palm branches, were a testament to their resourcefulness, a tangible manifestation of their resilience. Each structure, though humble, held within it the promise of warmth, safety, and a future yet unwritten. Their first days were spent in a blur of activity, a whirlwind of tasks aimed at solidifying their precarious foothold in this newfound paradise. They cleared debris from the pathways, widened the spring's natural outflow to create a small irrigation channel, and began to cultivate the fertile lands surrounding the oasis. Anya, with her inherent understanding of plants and nature, took the lead in identifying edible flora and establishing small gardens. Her nimble fingers, once calloused and blistered from the harshness of the desert, now moved with a newfound grace, tending to seedlings with a gentle touch that spoke volumes about her love for life, a love rekindled by the oasis's embrace. Kalen, his strength tested and proven throughout their perilous journey, focused on the more physically demanding tasks. He built stronger walls around their dwellings, reinforcing their protection against the occasional sandstorm and the ever-present threat of nocturnal predators. His hands, once rough and scarred, were now imbued with a purpose that transcended mere survival. He worked tirelessly, his movements fluid and efficient, the rhythm of his labor echoing the steady beats of his heart, a heart now filled with a love that surpassed even his own survival instincts. Their collaboration was effortless, almost telepathic. They had weathered the storm of their shared ordeal, their bond forged in the crucible of adversity, stronger than any material could ever be. They understood each other's unspoken needs, anticipating each other's actions with an intuitive grace that surprised even themselves. Their shared silence, once a burden of unspoken fears and uncertainties, had become a haven of understanding, a comfortable sanctuary where the unspoken words resonated louder than any spoken declaration. The evenings were spent around a crackling fire, its warmth a comforting counterpoint to the cool desert night. They shared stories of their journey, their voices low and hushed, the recounting of their struggles both a catharsis and a reaffirmation of their shared strength. Each tale, a testament to their endurance and their love, served as a bridge connecting their past to their uncertain future. They would marvel at the stars, their brilliance amplified by the absence of artificial light, their celestial dance mirroring the dance of their souls, intertwined and inseparable. As the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the oasis blossomed. The small gardens Anya had tended flourished, bearing fruit and vegetables that provided a varied and nourishing diet. The irrigation system Kalen had devised ensured a steady flow of water, sustaining the life of the oasis and its burgeoning inhabitants. The desert, once a symbol of their suffering, was now their provider, its harsh beauty a testament to their ability to thrive even in the most unforgiving of environments. Their lives weren't without challenges. Sandstorms still raged, threatening to engulf their fragile dwellings. Nocturnal creatures still prowled, their eyes gleaming in the darkness, a constant reminder of the dangers that still lurked in the shadows. But they faced these challenges together, their resilience tested but never broken. Their love, the foundation of their existence, served as their shield, protecting them from the harsh realities of their surroundings. One day, while exploring the outer reaches of the oasis, they stumbled upon a hidden cave, its entrance concealed by a curtain of cascading vines. Inside, they found ancient carvings on the cave walls depicting scenes of a civilization that had once thrived in this forgotten corner of the desert. The carvings hinted at a sophisticated understanding of agriculture, water management, and even astronomy, a testament to the ingenuity of a people who had once called this place home. The discovery ignited a spark of curiosity within them, a desire to learn more about the history of their newfound sanctuary. They meticulously documented the carvings, their hands carefully tracing the faded lines, deciphering the cryptic symbols. The cave became their classroom, their shared exploration, a testament to their burgeoning intellectual curiosity. It was a testament to their unwavering determination, a reflection of their thirst for knowledge fueled by their newfound hope and their enduring love for each other. They had not only survived, they had begun to flourish, to grow, to build a life worthy of the struggles they had overcome. The desert, once their prison, had become their teacher, and the oasis, their reward. A promise of a future as boundless and beautiful as the starlit desert sky above them. And as they stood hand in hand, gazing at the ancient carvings, they knew that their journey had just begun. Their story, once a tale of survival, was now transforming into a saga of perseverance, a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit and the unwavering power of love. The oasis, nestled in the heart of the unforgiving desert, was a vibrant paradox. Life bloomed riotously amidst the surrounding desolation. Palm trees swayed gently in the warm breeze, their fronds casting dappled shadows on the crystal-clear water of the spring. The air, thick with the scent of dates and unfamiliar wildflowers, hummed with the industrious buzz of bees and the chirping of unseen birds. It was a sanctuary, a haven, and yet it held a palpable sense of antiquity, a whisper of forgotten civilizations etched into the very stones that formed its natural walls. The ancient carvings, discovered by Alara and Kaylin at the edge of the oasis, were but a small fraction of the untold stories hidden within this seemingly idyllic paradise. Their initial exploration revealed a series of interconnected caves, their entrances concealed behind a curtain of verdant foliage. Each cave presented a new layer of history, each wall a canvas adorned with petroglyphs that spoke of a people who had thrived in this harsh environment for millennia. They depicted scenes of daily life, hunting gazelles, gathering dates, elaborate ceremonies under the watchful gaze of the stars. There were also images of celestial events, meticulously rendered, suggesting a deep understanding of astronomy and a sophisticated calendar system. Kalen, with his keen eye for detail and his intuitive grasp of patterns, began to decipher some of the symbols, his fingers tracing the outlines of figures and constellations. Ilara, ever practical, meticulously documented their findings, sketching the carvings and noting their locations with painstaking accuracy. Their work was slow and painstaking, but it was a labor of love. Each new discovery fueled their curiosity, deepening their connection not only to each other, but to the lost civilization that once called this oasis home. They unearthed fragments of pottery, intricately decorated with geometric designs and vibrant colors that defied the passage of time. They found tools made from obsidian, sharp and smooth, testaments to the ingenuity and craftsmanship of their predecessors. They even stumbled upon a small, intricately carved box, its surface inlaid with semi-precious stones which held a collection of dried herbs and seeds, hinting at the oasis's role as a vital trading post. The box itself, however, remains stubbornly locked, its secrets safely guarded for centuries. As days turned into weeks, their understanding of the oasis grew exponentially. They learned of a sophisticated irrigation system, a network of canals and aqueducts that channeled the precious spring water to every corner of the oasis, ensuring a consistent supply for both humans and wildlife. They discovered evidence of sophisticated agriculture, the cultivation of a wide variety of crops that thrived in the unique microclimate. They learned of the oasis's strategic importance, its position along ancient trade routes that connected far-flung civilizations. The oasis wasn't simply a place of refuge, it was a vibrant hub of cultural exchange, a testament to the resilience and adaptability of the human spirit in the face of adversity. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in a blaze of fiery hues, Kalen made a startling discovery. Deep within one of the caves, hidden behind a loose section of rock, he found a passage leading downward. It was dark, damp, and claustrophobic, but the air was surprisingly fresh, carrying a faint scent of earth and something else, something metallic. Armed with torches and their ever-present sense of cautious optimism, they ventured into the unknown. The passage descended gradually, eventually opening into a vast subterranean chamber. The air here was cool and still, the only sound the gentle drip of water from the cavern's ceiling. And then they saw it. In the center of the chamber, bathed in the soft glow of their torches, stood a massive structure, seemingly made of a dark, unidentifiable metal. It was unlike anything they had ever seen before, a complex mechanism of gears, levers, and intricate carvings, radiating a sense of ancient power and forgotten technology. It was a machine, undoubtedly, but its purpose remained a mystery, its function shrouded in the mists of time. As they circled the enigmatic machine, they noticed small panels along its surface, adorned with the same symbols they had encountered on the cave walls. Kalen, drawing on his growing knowledge of the ancient language, began to decipher the inscriptions. He discovered that the machine was called the Heart of the Oasis, a device designed to regulate the flow of water from the spring, ensuring its sustainability for generations to come. It was a testament to the advanced engineering and scientific understanding of the ancient civilization, a legacy of ingenuity that had long been lost to the sands of time. However, the inscriptions also revealed a darker truth. The machine had been damaged, its intricate workings compromised, causing the water flow to dwindle. The ancient civilization had attempted to repair it, but their efforts had been in vain, leading to the eventual abandonment of the oasis. The inscriptions hinted at a catastrophic event, a sudden shift in the desert's ecosystem that had rendered the oasis unsustainable. It was a story of hope and despair, a cautionary tale about the delicate balance between humanity and nature. Ilara and Kalen, armed with this newfound knowledge, knew their journey had taken on a new significance. They were not merely explorers, they were custodians, entrusted with the legacy of a forgotten people. They were determined to understand the full extent of the damage to the heart of the oasis, and, if possible, to restore it to its former glory. The task ahead was daunting, but they were ready. Their love, their perseverance, and their shared passion for discovery would guide them as they embarked on a new chapter of their extraordinary adventure, a chapter that held the promise of both unimaginable challenges and perhaps the potential to revive a lost paradise. The desert, once their prison, was now their canvas, and their story, etched in the sands of time, was only just beginning to unfold.